You guys. So Matthew 8 through 16, and we just open in prayer, and we just start talking about like the non-public ministry, the private ministry, which is sort of strange because he's got a lot to do, but he's like not telling anybody. Yeah. Any other observations? Big picture things that go on. That's definitely a theme. I'm glad you brought it up.
One thing he seems to mention a lot is like it's always following me is not going to be easy. Because he literally says, "Let the dead bury their own dead." And then this is something I never thought about, even though I heard this saying before. But he also says, "My burden is easy, my yoke is light," which I don't know. I mean, that's,
you're like, I don't know if that's really light.
Yeah, it's like, what do you mean there? Because everything else in the Bible seems to imply otherwise, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what I think I kind of know in that God will help encourage your spirit in a way, but it's still a very odd choice now that I think about it. Because I've known he said these two things, it's just, until I read all this together at once, I never put two and two together. And I was like, oh, that's really weird how that comes up.
Yeah. That is true. When you take a pace, when you do distance and depth together, you recognize adjacent stories. Mm-hmm. And that's something you don't get on Sundays. Because essentially on Sundays, we're trying to tell one story. And something about reading chapters, like 8 chapters in a week, puts consecutive stories together and they have tension. Like this story seems like it's saying A, and this one seems like it's saying B. But that's a great tension. I think that's like a really insightful thing to see. Is like the cost of discipleship. Is it a lot or not a lot, Yeah. Is Jesus' ministry public or private? Like, it's kind of a tension for sure.
Big
Yeah. Any other ones that come out to you?
So, I was still trying to read through our Good Brother Star Days. I didn't make any time to read it through the week.
Yeah.
But one thing that I liked is how our recurring thing is that Jesus, anytime that he heals somebody or he does whatever, he tells people not to talk about it.
Yeah.
I was kind of reading through the footnotes, and I thought it was really cool because it's like, because Jesus wants to be known as, the healer of your spirit, not a miracle worker.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. Like he doesn't. He performed his miracles because he has pity on these people and everybody. He wants to he has grace. But he tells them, all right, now don't go tell people I just did this. Because I don't want you to. Just let it be known. Just don't tell people.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. Not a slot machine. Mm-hmm. Not a magic show. Mm-hmm. That's certainly at least integral into the intention of why Jesus does what he does. I thought that definitely stuck out. I'm actually doing a personal reading through Luke right now. It seems to be even across synoptic gospels, meaning those. John is the other one that's written way after, but those three, a lot of parallels, and that theme is across a lot of the gospels. It's just very, and that needs to stand out, if it's being said several times.
Share something else. I think some of these have really, and when you sit down and read these parables, sometimes they're what at first, but some of them, if you think about them, they have some obvious lessons. Think about the one with weeds in 13.
Yeah.
It kind of explain why God lets us struggle sometimes. It says, if you pull the weeds now, you may uproot the wheat with it. And wait, and then collect the weeds at the end. So.
Yeah. Also, too. Say that mention the verse too. When we're identifying key things, it's good to put our eyes. So just tell me.
It's 29 and 30 and 13.
Okay, 13. Got it. Yep. So as far as the layout goes, we're identifying pretty much from 13 through all the way through. So chapter 13, from 1 through the last verse, is dedicated to parables. It seems very clear that Matthew's decided to bundle those together all at once. And I liked what you said in terms of, sort of an explanation for, or you're kind of saying maybe why the sun shines on the sinners and the saints, and the rain, pours on the sinners and saints. Kind of like why, gives explanation like why the world is the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, don't want to uproot things too quickly. Yeah.
I think there's like a theme of faith
Yeah.
about the parables and just the comparison between those who are healed versus the Pharisees' responses to that.
Yes.
I think he even tells them like be of little faith to the Pharisees in Matthew 16 verse 8. And then if you go back to like the verses of those who are healed, it's like your faith has made you well, or like because of your faith, your son is healed. And so there's this big, just a kind of also a class structure kind of between like the lower class believing versus like seeing like the upper class for those. Actually, never mind, these two terms in general. Never mind.
Yeah.
Anyway, theme of faith is
Yeah.
really
Well, I think it's interesting too because there are moments when Jesus almost seems surprised at the greatness of the faith of some of the people, like the lady that said, the one thing about the dogs and eating the crumbs from the master's table, and he's almost awed by it because there's so little faith among the Pharisees and other people, and even moments when like the apostles and John the Baptist doubted. So I think it's interesting that just so little is stark contrast to kind of the way of the world at the time.
Yes. Yeah. That was a good catch, though, Rocky, that it wasn't all just the poor people and it wasn't just the rich people. Although, if you did a statistical analysis, if you count all the people that got fed on that hill, those guys are getting, they're seeming to be able to access the kingdom, easily or more easy, But that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't exceptions to the rule. But like you said, there's at least it's obviously handling class. It's discussing class to some degree, and it's letting you know positions and who is what, and Gentile versus Jew, and it's definitely like mentioning it. Let's take a look at the old map here and get our grounding as we move in. But so our reading was 8 through 16 today, so that puts us halfway through the 4th block. So Spence, we talked about this, but some of the theme of Matthew is to portray Jesus as a new kind of a Moses. So it like reflects that he's like David, but didn't falter. He has a righteous kingdom that's everlasting. And then he's also like Moses in the sense he's a prophet, but he didn't fail in the desert. He in fact passed the test that the Israelites didn't pass. So if you look, there's 5 like little windows, little comic book windows, because that's supposed to parallel the 5 books of the Torah, the 5 Pentateuch books, and sort of present like a new kind of kingdom, a new creation that the Torah like shows an old Israel, and Jesus is like the new Israelite. So we got through 4 through 7 last time, which is basically like the introduction of the kingdom by way of the Sermon on the Mount. And then what we basically read, is we talked about basically miracles and faith, is that there's 9 stories. And so it's like super small, but you can read them. The leper, the centurion's servant, Peter's mother-in-law, the stormy seas, the demonized men, the paralyzed man, dead girl, 2 old men, mute man. So a good scattering of different kinds of miracles, different kinds of people, one faith. I think that faith is certainly a theme that ties like similar everything together. And in between there, if you see the structure of the scripture is that between there are these, as Spence talked about, follow me moments. So what the author reaches out to the reader to do is say, you are not reading this to be a spectator. Everyone that's reading this has to make a verdict about what they believed about what just happened, and who essentially the one that made it happen actually is. Is he a good guy, a good teacher, a miracle worker, a prophet, or something else? And the claim, of course, is that he is the Messiah, which, as we're reading, and we'll push into this later, but the Messiah is not just the guy who gets you to heaven. Like, the way I've talked about it at Citylights is I've used an illustration of like a ghetto before, and so the ghetto, when you walk into it, is a very prolific problem. Like the ghetto, you can't just come in there and give money to it, because there's something deeply, fundamentally broken in just the relationships, in like the dad and the fatherlessness, and the culture and the spiritual climate. And so we understand that evil is not just a problem in humanity, it's a prison. Evil is in the air we breathe, it's in the world. So that in Ephesians, we talked about this for those that were here, like it's the principalities, the powers. We were once dead in sin, asleep in sin. And so like a dead person isn't like, let me try a little bit harder. So the prison of evil is blind, it's making you blind and deaf and oppressed and poor and sinful and blind and spiritually blind and physically blind. So it's like the prison of evil means that there's evil around me, there's evil encasing above me by way of just authorities, human, spiritual, all those things. And it's also inside me. The snake's inside of me. And so that's where like the term that we're reaching for is, who is this guy that can like break all of that? That it's not just about getting into heaven and forgiving people. Like it's about smashing the principalities and the powers that are three-dimensionally entrenched around me. And who's going to do that? And he's that guy. And that's essentially what he's doing with all of these things. He is showcasing his authority over all evil. Every kind of evil, every kind of sickness, every kind of disease, every kind of human injustice, political, all that stuff. So anyways, I think that those 9 stories are just telling you this isn't one-dimensional. This is at least 9-dimensional, if not 360. And then you have 11 through 13, and basically Jesus throws down the gauntlet, gives these parables, and you have responses to it. And so Jesus is kind of saying, listen, the reason why some will believe and some won't is not for lack of proof. It'll be because of lack of faith. Like, the seed is nothing's wrong with the seed. The problem is the soil. And if the heart is like ready for the soil, it will see the Messiah everywhere. And if it's not, it won't. And so that's his like his analysis of like how people are like responding to him. And that's pretty much it for today. That's kind of like, I think, at least what the Bible Project map is telling us is the theme. But we can kind of make our way. So if you would go with me to, let's see, we'll start with Matthew 8. And we've got, we'll just zone in here on, we've got the leprosy story. The man is healed and he tells him to go to show himself to the priest. We have a centurion story, which the centurion is a Roman soldier. And he gets a healing for somebody that's not even in front of him. And Jesus is like going crazy about how much faith he has. There's a little vignette there where he heals a small little thing like a fever, and then he drives out these big demons. And then he's got a little follow me moment, which is, I don't have anywhere to go, and if your father dies, skip his funeral, because it's time. The time is now to come. And then he does a little wave moment. He calms the storm. And then the last thing I have in my Bible is, this is interesting now, verse 29. What do you want with me, Son of God? So the demon identifies Jesus as the Messiah. So that's interesting. And then we get a little bit, I think this is maybe the only one of the instances, but this come up twice now about the whole public versus private thing with Jesus. And he kind of explains a little bit here. He says, hey, let's see, where am I at? Verse 29, what do you want with the Son of God? They shouted, have you come here to torture us before the appointed time? Oh, okay, never mind. It's the demon that says this to Jesus. Then verse 30, some distance from them a large herd of pigs was feeding. And the demons beg Jesus. He says, you can drive us out, send us into the pigs, which is so bizarre. And then he says, go, and they plead with them and all that kind of stuff, and they die in the water. So this is all super bizarre, you know? As I read it, it's like, it seems very choppy. Like the narrative is just kind of like, just pretty rapid fire. And we're here, and we're there, and we're doing this, we're doing that. But yeah, any of these headings for Matthew 8, like, stick out to you when it comes to, Jesus is essentially let's call it showing, not telling. He's the Messiah. Like he's never really saying, like I'm the Messiah. He's like, who could do this? Who would do this? You know, it's like a question more than it is an exclamation point. And you know, we're reading through, and we're meant to pick up on some things. So, anyways, any notes on Matthew 8 that you guys have in your notebooks or in your memory?
Centurion, he's not only is he faithful, he seems very humble and realizes that he's only a man. He says God does not even deserve to come into his house at all. Because, well, now I embrace that wrong.
Yeah.
He doesn't deserve it. God obviously can come into any place he wants. It's just he feels like, oh, I don't deserve to have you come to me. And he still comes to God and says, but I have his faith, and God is very pleased with that.
Yeah.
I think it's more important to have good faith and be like, oh yeah, God just come into my house. There's also this thing about the synagogue leader later, and he asked Jesus to come to the house, and they just don't really share that special connection that Jesus did with the centurion right here.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Like, you've got a synagogue leader that's telling him to sit down and shut up, and then you've got a centurion who, at least politically, has way more clout than that synagogue leader, and he's like, he gets it. So, you know, what if a Nazi soldier came to Anne Frank's door and told Anne Frank, I'm not worthy to come into your house? Like, I mean, that's the equivalent. Like, we're talking about an imperial oppressor who only knows dominance, you know, somehow identifies this very fringe rabbi who is maybe out in the verdict as far as where he came from and what his lineage is and so forth. And he's like, somehow just is like, I know who you are, which is just kind of crazy. And so Jesus' quote to this is, hey, Jesus heard this, and he's like shocked, you know? So he's not saying, what it doesn't say is, hey guys, here's a little lesson, like as though he's kind of the tutor, and he planned for the lesson to take place to show somebody else. He's literally experiencing the moment as it happens. Like, that's what I get out of it, is it says Jesus was, I'm going to take it at face value, he was sincerely amazed. He didn't, like, I don't know how you splice up God's limited omniscience when it comes to him being a man who emptied himself of divinity. Like, he's fully God, I'm not saying that, but he's decided to limit his sovereignty, limit at least his scope of the future. He doesn't know when the time's going to end. And so he's walking around in his little trip through Galilee, just doing what he's supposed to be doing. And he doesn't know everything that's about to happen. And then all of a sudden he's like, whoa, like, that's, you know, like the Father has surprised him. You know, like, he's been surprised at what he's found on his little trip. And so, like, let's just, I mean, it's all hearsay, but like, assuming that what the story is saying is that the Father has appointed Jesus' Tuesday, and Jesus doesn't even know where his Tuesday is going to take him. And he shows up on the Tuesday to go see the Nazi that lets in Anne Frank, and he's just as flabbergasted as us, but he trusts his Father and he knows. And so, like, I'm not saying it's not what the scripture, I don't think, has told us to say this, but I'm just a hypothetical. If that's truly what's going on, if like the Father designed all that, like why did the Father do that? What is the impact of like Jesus running into a centurion, a Gentile? And what does it tell you about the story and the Father's plan? And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer. I'm just saying, like, just meditate on it with me for a minute. Like, why did the Father write Jesus' Tuesday like this? Why did he let that happen?
And maybe to point out that salvation and faith is going to be for both the Jews and the Gentiles, and sometimes the Gentiles or the outcasts can have an even more incredible faith than those who, belong.
Yeah.
At least by the worldly definition.
Does anybody remember, there's one other instance, does anybody remember the other instance of the Gentile coming to faith within the readings we did? I wholeheartedly, and here's why, Kelly, look at verse, I was thinking about verse 11. It says, I say to you that many will come from the east and from the west. So the east is usually a bad place. East is, east of Eden is exile. So east is not a good direction. And the west, the whole thing. And they will take their places. Okay, so where, and there's no higher, loftier accreditation that you could give anybody of a Jewish descent than Abraham. Like he's President Washington times 10. Like he's the hero around here, He's going to be friends with Abraham, many from the east and the west, and like Egyptians and all sorts of people. And Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into the dark, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So whatever it is that he's talking about in terms of the invitation, like the party pass, the bouncer lets you in, and when it says subjects of the kingdom, you're going to be surprised at who's in, and be very surprised and maybe offended at who's out, But I think Jesus is pretty stirred up on Tuesday because he's like, I kind of knew that was going to happen, but now, And I think that the now word, I think that's going to come up later, hopefully in the discussion, but I think that obviously timing, your appointed time, when he says your appointed time, I think that the thing that's amazing to Jesus is not maybe so much that the Gentiles are in, but it's the acceleration by which they're being added. That's really, I think, what's really catching Jesus off guard. It's pretty interesting. Let's see what else. What about the water? So there's a couple of scenes here. There's a lot of scenes with bread. There's a lot of scenes with fish. And then there's a couple scenes with water. And the water's never still. The water's always going crazy. And Jesus is just killing it on the water. So what's the deal with the water? Like why is the water coming up and shows up in Matthew 8?
Water's kind of always been known as like something you can't control.
Yes.
Water is always something that's just, it's going to run its course, it leads a path of destruction. I mean, it's going to cover everything it goes over, you can't control it. Like, it's just one of those forces of nature and plus is like, that's also kind of like a thing of awe. Like, nobody really knows what's out there. That's why there's like so many mysteries and so many, nowadays, like I said, obviously not then, I'm sure there are probably a lot of stories that didn't stick around, but like, now like sci-fi is about like sea monsters and water monsters, and you got Nessie, so there's a lot of like just a lot of unknown and a lot of stuff you can't control about water.
Yeah, verse 27, the men were amazed and asked, what kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. Like that, so it's a comparative scale. Like if the water is that powerful, and then there's a guy that comes and controls water, so then who is this guy? It's like a massive one up. Quick little like brainstorm. Where has water been important before, and what is it represented in biblical illustration and biblical heritage?
Is it like death?
Yeah.
Like water's represented death.
Yeah, the watery grave. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
like baptism.
Baptism. Yep.
Like your old life is put to death, and as you rise out of it.
Totally. Yep. Famous bodies of water that appear in the Bible.
Red Sea.
The Red Sea. Yeah. So.
The Nile River.
Yep. The Nile River is like a point of change for Moses, and it is both a place where. Now Kelly brought this up before. We were talking about fire and with the Daniel message, but that water in Noah's a great example of the flood from the very beginning. That the water could have killed Moses, but it saved him. Like the water should have drowned Moses, but the water in God's hands was used to save him. The water killed the Egyptians that pursued Moses and the Israelites into the desert, but saved Moses. So the water is a picture of judgment and salvation. And the instrument of judgment is the instrument of salvation, both in the flood, both in Sodom and Gomorrah. And the original like trademark brand of the water is the watery deep from the beginning of Genesis. Like in the beginning, the Spirit hovered over the waters. So the waters are a representative of God's blank canvas that are not necessarily evil or good, but they are chaotic. They are sort of neutrally require order. They're a canvas that requires somebody to control them. So what this is significant about, I think, is that, I don't know if it's the first, I think it's the first time in Matthew, but the water calling card is significant because it's not just saying that Jesus is the Messiah. It is going beyond that to say that Jesus is Yahweh. Like, it is going on to say, because at that point, there really is not definitive understanding of who the Son of Man is. They know that he's an agent that steps on the snake, but they don't know that he is God. And that's sort of what gets him killed. Like in the John narrative, the way that Jesus plays the God card is he says he has these I am statements. And the I am who I am is a hark back to Moses Yahweh. That's the Yahweh speech that he gives. So when he's saying I am, he is claiming that he is not just the representative to bring about salvation for the Jews, that he is God with feet. And this is he's showing, not telling, that exact thing. So that is a claim that Matthew's making earlier on in this passage. A couple other notes I saw. Matthew 8. Only the temple can declare somebody forgiven. So there's 2 or 3 instances where somebody's healed, and then forgiveness is connected, because sin in that time, both rightfully and unrightfully, sin is connected to sickness. If you're sick, you're sinful. And if you're sinful, you're sick. And so the idea is the one that can control, the only one that can forgive is the only one that can heal. And that is the priest at the temple, you know. And so the reason why they're offended is because this guy should have had to go out to the temple to go get healed. But Jesus is essentially healing the guy and saying the temple has feet now. And he's walking out and he's doing, you know, DoorDash now, basically. He's going to your house and he's offering a portable temple. And that's just can't be talked about. So anyways, go show yourself to Moses. He's showing himself to be a walking temple, to be a greater priest. He's showing himself to be the Gentile blesser from Abraham 12. So he's going out to go bless the nations, and he's expedited it faster than anyone expected. And the kingdom of heaven is like a bear market. I mean, it's accelerating way faster than even Jesus expects. He is the deliverer. So kings are known to deliver enemies. David was not able to deliver enemies from Israel because he had the enemy in his heart. But the righteous one is able to drive out enemies successfully. And so he's driving out enemies as the suffering servant king. He calls people to follow him as the new tribes of Israel, basically, the new disciples, the 12. And he explains to them that the call up is to bring in no less than bringing in a new creation, to bring in a new kingdom. And so that's going to cost you everything. And so it's not saying like, hey, don't go to people's funerals. It's just saying there is no cost too high for this. And there is no, and this is we're going to talk about Spencer's comment earlier. There's no cost too high, and there's no really earthly benefit that is necessarily promised upon the cost. So it's like Abraham was told to go, and so you're told to go. And you don't know where you're leaving or where you're going, but you know that God's plan will get you to the treasure in the field, the kingdom of heaven. He calms the storm, so he plays the God card, and he shows his identity beyond just being Messiah, but being God with feet. And then he is driving. So here's another water story. So the pigs, of course, are, if you're a Gentile, or if you're a Jew, you don't eat pigs. So to drive the demons into these pigs and then seal that up with like a water covenant and kill them is just it's like taking out the trash. You know what I'm saying? Like he's coming to do the work. And so in all these cases, God is able, he is capable, he is called, he is the line from Abraham, he is the son of David, the son of Jesse, and he is apt and adept to execute God's perfect will according to the timing. He is on schedule, he is on target, he is on time, and he is the Messiah. And he is not, and nothing will get in his way. And he is going to accelerate and move the frontier of the kingdom, the line of scrimmage, forward, however he wants to do it. And we're learning along with the centurion that the power structures of the world are not as sure as we thought that they were. and that the one who's really calling the shots around here comes from Nazareth. So he's got a pretty good introduction. You know what I mean? You know, it's like he doesn't want everybody to know about it just yet, but he's killing. All right, so then chapter 9, we've got let's just kind of recall. So we've got Jesus forgives and heals the paralyzed man, which is another forgiveness thing. The calling of Matthew, the very author of the book. Matthew is a tax collector for the Roman government, and he says, "Follow me," and Matthew gets up and follows. He eats with sinners and tax collectors. Tom Rolson led a great devotion with elders the other day, and he was like, I don't know if your stomach. He was like, you know, we have maps for sex offenders, you know, on the map, and Jesus seems to go to places that we can't seem to stomach, you know, and Jesus is going to go visit who he visits. And I think that scripture maybe helps us consider some of the offendable, to us at least in the flesh, ways that God reaches out to everyone. And he has this classic line, it's one of my favorite lines, I think, in our readings for the week, but I desire mercy, not sacrifice. He talks about that there. Fasting and feasting. John fasts while Jesus feasts. That's interesting. Jesus heals a dead girl. And then this is the 9th story, I think, before it kind of closes up. So we've got 3 by 3 by 3, 9 different healing stories, and the final one is the blind and the mute. I think it's 2 blind and 1 mute. And casts out a demon. So, anyways, we're in Matthew chapter 9. What are we learning about either? It seems like the 2 core themes are the identity of Jesus and the definition of faith. You know, what is faith? But anything stick out to you that you liked or you had questions about?
I like when he said, "Take heart, daughter, your faith has healed you." I've just had a lot of times in my life where my faith has either rescued me or healed me from something that could have turned out really bad.
Yeah. Are you able to share anything specific on any of that?
I used to do like really hard drugs in clubs and stuff, and my faith guided me away from that. And everyone I know that was doing all the same things as me that I used to talk to are either dead or in jail right now. So,
Jeez.
I'm guessing that's where I would have ended up.
What year was that?
I want to say 2019, 2018 to like 2020. No. No. I was 18 and 19 and like to 21 years old.
Yeah. And then when you said, I think the way you said it was like your faith was, that's a pretty, so how did your faith come alive in that? Or like how did that come about?
My family's very grounded in it, and my family over here telling me these people you're hanging out with, these things you're doing are not good, basically. But what really got me was like, I felt the Spirit telling me this isn't going to end well, and it scared me, so I withdrew. Still, thanks. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for sharing it. I think that one of the things I think that stands out for so we get 9 stories, and it's just different, like people, different paths, but also different healings, you know. And it's like I think the scripture is like really powerful to like help us think about the different ways that faith encounters the heart, you know. And sometimes it's like, I mean, I'm thinking about John and Nicodemus and stuff. It's like he meets him in the middle of the night, and then some people are like praying for somebody else, and some people are praying for themselves, and some people are like Jewish, and some people are Gentile. But I like that too. Something about the fact that he calls her a daughter. I'm not sure if there's other spots where he like identifies something quite so intimate, but that word pops out to me because the family metaphor is consistent. Like there's a couple mentions, for example, when his blood brothers and sisters come to the door and knock at the door, and he's like, oh, I'm busy right now because these are my brothers and these are my sisters. And something about him calling her a daughter is, I don't know, just kind of redefines what a daughter is, I guess, you know? And like, that's kind of how God identifies, like, I don't know, something about like, we are who we're supposed to be when we're in faith, when we're operating in trust. And we're just not who we're supposed to be at all when we're not, you know? But it's really great line that really stuck out to me too.
One thing that stuck out to me was just like especially chapter 9, verse 9, kind of on. I'm sorry. With Jesus eating the tax collectors and sinners.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's pretty not customary. And
Yeah.
This isn't the first time Jesus did something that was, you know, like in the previous chapter. You know, it's like, Lord, let me go first and bury my father. Jesus said to him, follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead. So it's like his cause is bigger than our customs.
Yeah.
Which is kind of uncomfortable. I'm a pretty, you know, I like customs.
Yeah.
Kind of, it's just comfortable, you know what I mean? But I don't, like, he seems to be kind of against it. And I don't think.
He references it, keep going though, yeah, keep going.
Yeah, I don't think it's just like to be contrary just for the sake of being contrary.
Yeah.
Or to work against customs just because all traditions are bad or customs are bad or whatever. But I think it's intentional. But like I think it's important to draw that line as to like, you know, why, or ask that question is like, why is he breaking the customs?
Yeah. I was thinking about he gets up in their face later about how people will say that they're like giving an offering to their parents, but really they're just trying to kill two birds with one stone, and like the heart is not in it in their worship and their offerings. And so he says, you're more connected to your human customs. I think that's exactly what it says. I'm thinking about, it's in chapter 15. Then some Pharisees and teachers of the law came to Jesus from Jerusalem and asked, this is verse 1, now verse 2, why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? So they're actually busting him on the tradition. So they've pursued him, they've antagonized him. And they're saying, like, why did they do this? Are they like trying to be rebellious? Are they anti-establishment or something? And they don't wash their hands before they eat. This is the big complaint, which is a custom. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to think of like, grandma always put the towel over the sweet tea. Chinese people always let the uncle eat first. Like, there's just certain things that sort of make up what you're about, man. You know what I mean? And don't mess with them. And they come to him and they're like, don't mess with my stuff, you know? And I don't get the sense that he's saying I'm breaking customs for no reason. I think that he's challenging maybe the heart behind it. Jesus replied, and why do you break the command of God? So he is, you had a great little alliteration with C's and custom and cause. Yeah, the cause is more important. The commandment is the cause. And why do you break the commandment? Why do you undermine the cause to get to your custom? Is what he says. Why do you break the command of God for the sake of your own tradition? You've added, so much, and don't lift a finger to help any of these children. You tied a millstone around your neck, trying to get in the way of these little children. For God said, honor your father and mother, man. Just honor your father and mother. Treat them with respect and honor them and see their value and bless them. That's what I want your heart to do. And anyone who curses their father and mother puts death. But you say that if anyone declares that what might have been used to help their father and mother is devoted to God, they are not to honor their mother or father with it. Thus you nullify the word of God for the sake of your tradition, you hypocrites. Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. So like, yeah, I get my mom a Mother's Day card, and I like flick everybody off on the way out there to Target to get the card, you know what I mean? And like get ticked when like my brother gives her a bigger gift than me, and like, you know what I mean? Just, why are we even doing what we do? It's just, at some point, the motions, like going through the motions, miss the point. You miss the point along the way, and you're a hypocrite, and your lips are far from your heart, and you are so dysfunctional, is, you know, the indictment here. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human traditions, human rules. Jesus called the crowd to him and said, listen, understand, what goes on in someone's mouth is not defile them, it's what comes out of it that defiles them. It's not meaning like, it's not your dietary customs. You're Jewish, I don't eat pigs, so now I'm holy. Like, it's what comes out of you that fulfills the law. And so, anyways, this run is obviously the non-example. Like you were saying, like right after that comes the Canaanite woman, who's ironically gets it more than all these people that read the Bible nonstop. And so there's breaking of categories, there's a challenging of like customs, and we are just as much meant to see and read what faith is as what it's not. And whatever faith is, he is explaining that the Pharisees and the Sadducees exist in this story to show us what it is not. And what it definitely is not is going through the motions. He's watching out, he calls it the yeast of the Pharisees versus the mustard seed of faith. The yeast of the Pharisees makes you blind for the Messiah in front of you. And it's a way of, I don't know what you'd call it, just getting sensitive, maybe? Like, have you ever felt this way where you sort of, you feel dull to God, you don't feel spiritually alive, you know, and there's a kind of prison we create for ourselves of doubt, you know, maybe. I don't know how you talk about this, but like, what does it mean to struggle in our faith, to lose faith, to feel more Pharisee and Sadducee sometimes, you know, than the little girl. But anyways, I was just thinking about what you're saying for customs. Were you, Sam, were you pointing to something in Matthew 9 with that one?
Yeah, with the tax collectors and sinners.
Tax collectors and sinners, yeah. What do you guys think about this phrase, I desire mercy, not sacrifice? So that's the little sermon in a sentence that he gives in the little truth to trust that day. You're really worried about that I'm eating with prostitutes. And it's just, I don't know, like I said, the whole sex offender thing, that's probably a pretty visceral way to think about it. Like, we're so egalitarian, it's hard for us to create categories, but we're trying to think about something that somebody could do that would literally make us cross the street from them. You know, not because of danger, but because of association. Like, I just can't even, and Jesus goes and eats with those people, right? And so then it stirs up the whole sermon tension, and he gives them the line, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. So, does anybody have any, how do you think about that? Like, what's mercy and sacrifice? What do you think about?
It sounds
That
really
means-
cool.
Yeah.
It sounds dope.
Yeah.
Practice.
Yeah, it's a mic drop for sure.
Yeah.
Wisdom is proven by her deeds. He told, the people that were like, talking about John the Baptist. He's like, you didn't go out to the wind looking for reeds or whatever. Wisdom is proven by the deeds. Anyways, sounds cool.
Yeah, I like to hear it. Like, when I first hear it, I'm like, and also it's like, oh, cool, I don't have to give anything up. That's pretty cool.
The way I think about it, I mean, clearly he's showing mercy to people that in that day and age would like, be deserving of death or basically have no compassion at all, people like prostitutes or tax collectors. But when I hear the term sacrifice applied in this scenario, I think about kind of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and they're like, oh, look how righteous I am. I'm sacrificing my money like to the temple. I'm sacrificing my time and my resources to honor God, even though their heart's not in it. So I almost think of it as kind of a false sacrifice or a public show of it is how I interpret it.
Yeah, versus like something more real.
Versus like a true sacrifice, like the disciples and the apostles did. I think we're going to get into that a little bit.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but like, yeah, like there obviously is a exaggeration or like emphasis on the cost of like following, you know, and then of course, you know, you read it forwards and backwards and you know that like these guys end up giving their lives, many of them, for this. And so sacrifice really, it's almost like he's like, well, healthy people don't need to get a doctor. And of course what he's like saying is like, well, you're not healthy, you just think you are. You know what I mean? And so it's like, you're not really sacrificing, you just think you are. But yeah, I mean, I think it says something that the temple decides to get legs and go DoorDash to the person and heal the person, like instead of just staying there. So I think, well, I guess the reason why it sticks out is if you applied it to the question of what's faith, like, I think there's a way to think about faith like a ladder to get up to heaven versus mercy, not sacrifice, is basically making this claim that heaven is coming down and that the whole posture of heaven is receiving the one that comes down as opposed to sacrifice, which is like building up my religious like credentials. But anyways, that happens 2 times. He talks about that when he talks about the Sabbath later on. But anyways, that concludes the 9 stories. That's 9 healings, 9 obvious little calling cards about the identity of Christ. The new temple, the new David, the new Solomon. He talks about later he's like a Jonah. He is greater than Moses. He is the temple with feet. He is the storm controller. He's Yahweh. So he's like showing without telling all this stuff, and he's saying, come and follow. I'm bringing about this kingdom, this new kingdom. Okay, so then he sends out the 12, and they list out the names, and he gives them this little speech about going out. And it's kind of an intimidating speech, I'll be honest. Seems kind of intimidating to me. What's your like summary of like the speech that he gives the 12 disciples when they go out?
Don't take anything with you and good luck.
Good luck, dude. It'll all work out for you in the end.
Like the Lord will provide is kind of the idea. Like you don't need to take anything with you. Got you covered. Got you covered.
Yeah. You don't need to write your sermon before you preach it. You'll know what to say. That was another one, right? The Lord will provide. How about this one? Let's see. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his child. Children will rebel against their parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by everyone because of me, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. When you are persecuted in one place, flee to another. Truly, I tell you, you will not finish going through the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. So he is in one way saying you're safe, but also in another way he's saying you're super in danger. Right? So have we seen, let's do a like where have we seen this before, but like when you think about, let's just say danger. So danger, and then like, but then inside of danger is protection, provision, and promotion. Have we seen that anywhere before, whether it be in Daniel, whether it be in Genesis, or what did you say?
Joseph.
Yeah, for sure. What stands out to you about that?
That he's kind of he's on a journey in a sense where he doesn't have any belongings that he's brought with him, but somehow is promoted to areas where he's persecuted but also blessed.
Yes.
Throughout his life.
I couldn't agree more. Like, so it's like I'm going to show my sovereignty. I think that's kind of a good, probably the right theme. I'm gonna show, not tell my sovereignty by putting the underdog with the overdogs. Tremendous underdog. It's just a one-man army that goes into the middle of like the chaos waves. In this case, represented by like Romans and all these types of things. And then I'm gonna let the underdog win. I'm gonna let Joseph like get raised up, and that says a lot about the one that Joseph follows. So. Yeah, I wrote down on my little truth and trust for that day that I think it's speaking to the audience as well, we're being sent on a mission that's already been fulfilled. So like the sovereignty thing is saying just like Joseph, wherever your foot goes, like I've already been there ahead of you. And it's not on you. You know what I mean? Like you're going to go out there. You don't have to plan the sermon. You don't have to like bring the food. You don't have to bring the gun or the weapon or the ammunition. Like you're undefeated, you know, because I'm on your side. So anyways, he goes on, he talks about, he closes it by saying, anyone who welcomes you welcomes me. So that's Abraham. Anyone who blesses you will be blessed. And anyone who welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet as a prophet will get a prophet's reward. And whoever welcomes a righteous person as a righteous person will receive a righteous person's reward. So just as before we get into this next section about Matthew 11, what's the theme about, like, what do you think Jesus says is the history of, like, the prophet's experience? Like, what has Jesus basically said thus far about the experience of, like, a prophet? If you're a prophet, what's going to happen to you? Or what's the kind of experience that goes on? Do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall on the ground outside of the Father's care. Which is right out of the Sermon on the Mount. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered, so don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Whoever acknowledges me, which is the prophet, whoever acknowledges me before others, I will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before others, I will disown them before my Father in heaven. What do you think? How would you explain Jesus's like expectation for the treatment of prophets?
They'll be treated well in heaven, but you have a rough time of it here.
Yeah. There seems to be a pretty clear message, whether it's the guy burying his dead or the 12 that are going to get sent out, that whatever the light yoke is, as you know, we were talking about earlier, Spencer was talking about earlier, whatever the light yoke is, it doesn't preclude death. It's not including death and suffering. And so I tend to think it reminds me back to, like, blessed are the persecuted. If you persecute because of me, you'll inherit the kingdom of heaven. And he's telling the disciples, count the cost. Don't start building if you don't know where you're headed and what the building's going to be. And they hated me, so they're going to hate you too. So that is definitely one of the messages that goes back to the light yoke thing. And this is actually, Spencer, where we're headed right on to Matthew 12 when he starts to talk about the light yoke. So speaking of prophets, here comes your favorite prophet's favorite prophet. John the Honey Badger the Baptist, had to go past all the high priests, and they picked the guy from Possum Kingdom to represent the herald of this Messiah. So here's a guy who did it all right. He's kind of the greatest ever born of a woman. He says accurately that he couldn't tie Jesus' sandals, and he was the first to be filled, and maybe only to be filled in the womb with the Holy Spirit. And he comes out and he does everything right, except he crosses the wrong political alliance, and then he gets his head chopped off in the meantime. But anyways, he cries out to Jesus, and Jesus he says, "Are you the Messiah?" So he was filled with the Spirit, first to say that Jesus was Messiah, now he's doubting. And Jesus tells John, hey, just tell John this: the blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor, which is all Messiah behavior. But verse 6 says, blessed is anyone who doesn't stumble on account of me. What's obviously missing from this whole thing is the whole part about the prisoners are set free. So he literally runs down the entire gauntlet of everything that's supposed to be happening in the kingdom, yet this prisoner is not going to get set free. In fact, his head is going to get lopped off. So how does that make us feel as the reader?
Terrified.
Yeah. Particularly Kelly, like, I think, what do you think about the fact that there's this whole promise with like 5 pieces to it, and then when he gives the sermon, all of a sudden, switch, like he just takes that last little promise out in that moment and says, try not to stumble. Like, what does that mean? Is he like gone back on his promise, or what? Like, what do you make of the fact that he doesn't include? Obviously, it doesn't include the promise of the prisoners, promise for the prisoners. What do you think about that?
I mean, he even tells us later, in this world, you will have trouble. Getting your head chopped off is troubled, but I mean, Jesus even says, I've overcome the world, and death on earth means nothing compared to what we inherit when we die, whatever means by which we're killed, I guess. It still makes me frightened and makes me not really want to, take up my cross and follow. I want to think about the pain and just the gruesomeness of if I were to get my head chopped off.
Yeah. That's, Kelly, you know what? That's a pretty apt way of talking about it. I feel like that's certainly the way I feel, and it's got that kind of frustrating feel to it, like almost like let down. I don't know if you've ever been in a faith spot before where it's like, it's not just that the thing didn't work out the way you wanted to, it's that the promise feels like it's just mocking you.
Almost dread, kind of, like what? You know the promise exists, but you almost dread what the road, like, to fulfilling that promise will look like.
Yeah. And like, maybe I'll just like give up on the way. I always think of like people getting like Chinese water tortured, and I'd be like, I probably wouldn't make it 5 minutes. I'd be like, there's my mom lives, like, I'd be like giving up information, like he hangs on, and Jesus honors him and says he didn't do anything wrong, he is going to be, he's going to have to die waiting on the promise without receiving it. In other words, some people will have to receive the promise on the other side of death, which is a scary thing to think about. But he obviously wants us to know that, think about that, be ready for it when it happens, and count it. What do you think?
It's pretty frustrating. Yeah, it's like because he's like John the Baptist didn't live a very self-indulgent life, and I think
He did it right.
Exactly. Yeah, he was very I think in the Matthew is careful in pointing that out. Like it was like he lived with like a whole lot of nothing really. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then like he preached in this whole he had disciples, and he had started he longed for the Messiah.
Yeah.
And here is the Messiah. And like now John came to enjoy him, and not only can he enjoy the blind seeing and the lame walking, but like he also has to know that he's going to die in prison.
Yep.
It's like that just has to have, you have to have so much faith to endure that kind of if Jesus sent you back word and you read that'd be like crushing.
Yeah.
But I think like what you said earlier, that's probably the best example of waiting for the promise to be fulfilled after you die. And some people don't ever see it. Even if you live your whole life, prohibiting yourself from self-indulgence or just acting weird, for the Lord, having an incredible ministry and doing everything right. It's like you might not get it, like you might not see it come to fruition. It's hard to hear.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's taught though. Like I'm glad it's taught.
Yeah, like you get it. Like the Bible gets it.
Yeah, because there are people like that, like on earth now.
Yeah.
It's like I feel bad for them. They don't really get to see like all the fruits of their labor.
Yeah.
But like the stories, it's like well we will. And it's like hopeful.
Yeah.
In a sense. But,
Man, it's like one of the hardest things when you're trying to do everything right and somebody's doing everything wrong and you're getting like your neck stepped on and somebody else is like killing it. That's just hard. It's like something about it and being a human being doing that. And I mean, they kind of pulled the car over here for a second. So like, he's about to end this thing by saying, I am gentle and humble in heart. Take up my yoke, for it is easy and light. and I'm just going to take you on a walk in a grain field, and you're going to have more rest with me walking in the wilderness than you would have in a pampered kingdom with Pharaoh. That's his claim, and he's not backing up on it. I think he's being literal, So I guess my question to you, and this is, I think, what the Bible comes up off the page to come and talk to us about, is is it worth it? Is he bankrupt on the promise? And how do you deal with that? How do you deal with your doubt? How do you deal with when you don't see fruit for faithfulness? How do you deal with feeling like you're being punished for doing right? Spence, what do you think about, what's your thought on the whole the light yoke doesn't seem so light?
I think the yoke may be referring more to your soul and eternal destination more than your day-to-day life, maybe more it's a security thing, that you put your soul and you can rest assured what, even if there are going to be hard things on the end, at the end everything will work out for heaven. Maybe, I don't know what I guess it means, just because it seems like on earth there really is there is going to be hard time, suffering, and everything else. And I don't know, I guess that's what it means.
Go ahead. I hear that, it reminds me a lot of a story that kind of means a lot to me, even though it's not necessarily in the Bible, but it's the footprint story in the sand.
Yeah.
And it's just it's one of those things where when you're at your hardest, he's there with you and he's carrying you through it. So that's the point of a yoke. It's where it's a device that allows two people to carry the same load. So it's basically he's helping you carry it through. So it's not necessarily, I don't think it's necessarily saying taking following my footsteps and everything's gonna be hard, because it is gonna be hard, but it's also you can rely on me to get you through the hard things in life as well. I think that's kind of the way that I hear the yoke versus the following me is going to be a life of treachery.
Well, I think of it that way too, kind of as a let me come alongside you and carry the burdens of the world. I don't want to compare Jesus to being part of a team of oxen.
Yeah.
It works better when there's two people to carry the load, and he wants, Emmanuel means God with us. He wants to be with us and do the load that's life with us.
Yeah. So this is interesting. A lot of times when people hear the word faith, it can run away with itself, becoming if you have enough faith, you can just have everything that you want. And I definitely think there's a way that we lean back on sovereignty so much that we don't take responsibility for go after it, man, and knock and seek and ask and be active in faith and pursue healing and pursue good things, But that has to reconcile with the stuff we're talking about right now, which is deferred faith, deferred hope. So if the scripture is trying to talk about faith today, and faith is the access to the kingdom of heaven, if you pulled the car over right here, John the Baptist, the sick lady, all these people getting healed, all this stuff, how would you describe faith that is able to reconcile both that sometimes people are healed and sometimes people are not? And sometimes people die with the promise in their hand and some people die with the promise waiting. So what's that? How would you, if faith has to answer to both of those things, what is faith really? How would you talk about that? Jesus says that it's, let's see, chapter 9, verse 14. Then John's disciples came to him and asked him, how is it that we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples do not fast? So here's another one, like, how come my path, you got me eating saltines and you guys are just eating great food? You're having so much fun. Jesus answered, how can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and then they will fast. No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment, making them tear worse. Neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst, and the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour the new wine into the new wineskins, and both are preserved. What is the new wine? Do you guys think that means? What is the new wine?
I would say Jesus.
Yeah.
Probably in the fulfillment of. I never really thought about that. The new wine.
Yeah. Have you ever heard Jesus talk about the ages? There's 2 ages. The age of what? The age to come, and the age, I guess it's the age, I don't want to say the age of now, that sounds so clunky. What does he say? The present age, and the age to come. Yeah. And so you can't pour new wine into old wineskins. So you can't just pour in the new thing into the old thing without destroying the old thing. And you can't do a patch, like put a new covenant and just add it on to the old covenant. You have to get rid of the law to live in the Spirit. And so what is really important and helpful for us, I think, actually I'll talk about it I think on Sunday probably, because it's about like gifts of the Spirit, healing and stuff, is like essentially what Jesus is doing in his ministry about the kingdom of heaven is he is making 2 claims that are not contrary, but they are in conflict. They have tension. And that is that the age to come, which is us living with the Father in heaven, is both now and not yet. So that is the tension. And it would almost be easier if we lived in a world where nobody gets healed. The gifts are done, and sometimes, there's some people that live that way, and but it's like, if you don't have to like lean in with faith, like the little child, then you just sort of rest on the sovereignty thing, and you just say God just makes it all happen, and we don't have to have faith. And it'd be easier to have nothing answered, or it'd be easier for everything to be answered right now. But Jesus seems to be declaring that, like he says, well, a prophet's not honored in his own town. And he says, even Elijah could only heal a few people, but he didn't heal everybody. So, I don't know what your personal belief is on healing. I'm not here to get into that necessarily, but the model for Jesus' healing was not to go into hospitals and empty them. It was to go wherever the Father wanted to, according to the kingdom schedule, and not let anybody know about it. And so the reckoning there is like, John has to live in the already not yet. Are the dead being raised? Yes. Are the prisoners being released in this case? No. Blessed is the one that doesn't stumble. So when one person has a baby and the other one doesn't, when one person sees a healing, the other one doesn't, when one person sees a bunch of fruit and the other one doesn't, blessed is the one that doesn't stumble. Because we live on the edge. We live right there at the line of scrimmage of the thin place between the already and the not yet. And the kingdom of heaven is here, but it's also not yet. And that's just a tough thing. But going back to the Beatitudes, let me just read these. Blessed is the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. And blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus is not giving another set of 10 commandments. because that's the old covenant. That's the old wine. The new wine is not saying you're going to be blessed if you get more righteous, or if you cry more, or if you hold your tongue. You are not going to get blessed, you already are, because the kingdom of heaven is here right now. And the yoke, which is walking on the sand on the shore with Jesus, is already like here right now. So I think that the cost of discipleship is super high, but Jesus is also not a false promiser. And like, I think in personal life, like I don't know where it leaves you, but having everything isn't really everything, you know? Like the walk on the shore, the walk in the grain field is the whole point, you know? And so when he points to his disciples and says, these are my brothers, these are my sisters, these are my disciples, this is the family that's going to go forth into eternity. Like, I think maybe for some, like, it literally is the blessings on the other side of death, you know? But I think also that the kingdom of heaven is right now. And I think that that to be in danger with Jesus is actually safer than to be safe without him. And I don't know how, where your guys' story goes, but like distance from Jesus and hard-heartedness towards Jesus and getting stuck in rules and religion and traditions and all that stuff is slavery, you know? And I think he's making a claim that certainly for eternity, if not right now, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. So let's see. Well, we got through 12, and I guess that's enough. Let me see what time it is. Yeah, 7:52. So these are some thoughts. I don't know what you think about them, and you guys can maybe offer a closing thought at the very end. But Timothy, if you had those truths to trust for the week.
It ain't happening.
Hey, what?
It ain't happening.
Oh, it's not in there?
Well, it's in there, it's just not turned on.
Oh, it's broke? Broke's a joke, dude. Let me see. And y'all think of some closing comments of like how you guys would, what the Spirit might be saying to you through the reading this week. Let me see. My truth and trust for the week is that I think that Jesus is making the claim and he's showing that the kingdom of heaven is right here, right now. And we believe in the sovereignty of God in the sense that we can go out without the words to say, he'll give us words. But at the same time, faith matters. It's hard to read the passage without seeing that actively going, acting, seeking, knocking. People receive different things based on what their faith is, you know? So anyways, I think that seems to be the message that he gives on the mountain, and then he comes down the mountain and then he just like lives that message out. And all of the actions and things that happen reflect that. I wrote down from Matthew 9 that heaven goes down, man doesn't come up. So that's why I think the whole talk about like mercy more than sacrifice is important. Because it's not that rich people can't get into heaven, but I think that Rocky's right that like it seems like the poor people seem to have an easier time like seeing him. I wrote down from Matthew 10 that disciples are sent on a fulfilled mission so that we can go out right now and we don't have to worry about like getting it right or getting it wrong, like God is holding us. The prophets are always persecuted, but they're rewarded. We talked about that. The parables. The main point of the parables with the seeds and the fish seems to be that the kingdom is low and slow and small, but the kingdom of heaven advances in big ways. You know, small things elaborate into big impact and change in the course of history and eternity. Yeah, and those are some of the, I guess that's kind of it. I mean, there's other things out there too, but it's hard to talk them through. Any guys have any closing thoughts in terms of the whole overall look at the book so far?
This is the first time I've actually like read and felt like really truly read Matthew and like the things Jesus said. So it was just really encouraging to read.
Yeah. It's almost hard to explain. It almost has to be experienced,
Yeah.
kind of day by day.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
There's definitely a lot of tension, yeah.
A lot of what?
Tension.
Yeah.
And I don't think that tension's meant to be resolved or wiped away easily. I think it's supposed to be there,
Yeah.
which can be difficult, but it's good.
Yes. Like when he ends the sermon with, there will be people with accurate academic and theological understandings of who Jesus is, and people that heal people that are not in heaven. Like he's leaving you with that sermon, like pretty poor in spirit and pretty like needing of the gospel. So I think you're right. Like he doesn't do us any favors. He actually, I love Francis Chan's whole thing is like, usually preachers on Easter like try and keep the message short and clear. And his biggest crowd, he comes up and he says, basically, if you're out there and don't understand what I'm about to say, you weren't going to understand it anyways. So I'm just going to call it a day and go home. You know what I mean? Like that was his like big 3-point sermon with the funny illustration at the beginning or whatever. He's just like, listen, like this is like getting through the eye of a needle. It's impossible, without me kind of thing. I think that traveling around with a Jewish Messiah named Jesus, who's claiming himself to be the Messiah, breaks up all of our religious patterns and assumptions about where the good place is and who's going to get us there. Well, not who's going to get us there, but how we get there. And I think that it makes us uneasy for the right reasons. Like, I think we're supposed to have a sense of assurance of salvation and his sovereign, like his mark on us in the Holy Spirit. But in terms of like how he does that, it doesn't seem to give us a lot of clarity and conclusion, to me. So it's a very humbling book. And I think that of all, and I mentioned this last week, but like the word that seems to come to mind when it comes to who he is calling us to be is little children. And I think that is important. I think that says a lot of like, what is it that he calls us to be? If we are supposed to respond to this and be a disciple, he says, disciples are little children. They're loved, they're named, they're known, they're protected, they're provided for, they're a little sparrow. And don't get too big for your britches. And don't try and get outside of your pay grade. And don't try and plan your steps too far in advance. I'm going to give you the daily bread. I'm going to treat you like a sparrow. You're going to be small in my eyes. And a small little mustard seed like that, watch out. Because all it takes is a little bit of faith. And that actually, if it's even an ounce of faith measured against pounds of religion and sacrifice, an ounce of faith is like a Bitcoin from 2016. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's got massive returns, So be careful about the yeast of the leaven. Be careful of this thing that happens to us when we get old and jaded and bitter and we stop praying for stuff and we stop believing for things. Like, be careful with that. Like, that is cancer. Doubt is cancer. But, like, don't be discouraged or like underwhelmed by a small little bit of faith. If God told you on Sunday to go back to the back of the room and go and talk to a stranger because God told you to do it, if God told you to give 3 cents into the offering basket, like, it's not about the amount. It's not about, that's the parable. Like, we are looking for big and fast and strong, and he's looking for small and meek and weak, And he's like, a little bit of faith does more than a gallon of yeast. A little bit of children is going to overthrow Rome, Sadducees, and Pharisees. And so, anyways, that's a picture for me that I think that I walk away with of what it means to be with the yoke, is to be a little child and to have a little bit of faith,